At this point, last step took us through most of what PLTW wants us to do. I didn't add all the annotation, but I gave you a starting point. At least you know how to put that on there. The one thing I forgot to do was to add some insulation. So insulation is on the Annotate tab, and it's a detail item, and it has its own little tool. So I click on insulation, and the default width is going to be 3.5 inches, and the location is going to be in the center of the wall. We could put near side, far side, but we're going to use up the whole wall stud cavity, so we'll put in the center. Center is automatically chosen when I get close enough. I can start at the bottom, go up to the top, hit escape a couple times, be done with it, and there I have some insulation. We don't have the right width of wall stud yet, so I'm just going to leave the insulation in there. When I click on it to select it, I can change the width up here on the options bar or in the properties later. So for now, it's just enough to have insulation in there. I'm not going to insulate the roof yet because we're going to insulate the ceiling. PLTW insulates the roof, but we're going to do it a little differently, so we're going to hold off on that. Now, let's take it to the next level. So some of the things we need to do is we need to change the wall construction. Right now, I'm selecting insulation. I want to select the actual wall and zoom in a little bit. So the wall is shed wall with siding, but if I go to Edit Type, Edit Structure, I can see that the structure layer and the core, those studs are, well, it says softwood lumber, which is okay. If it doesn't, if it says metal stud layer, click on here to find softwood lumber material. But the width is 6 inches because it started as a wall with 6-inch metal studs. 2x6s are not 2 inches by 6 inches, they're 1.5 inches by 5.5 inches. We're going to see the wide face, so this is going to be 5.5 inches. You put 5.5, 5 space 1/2, but make sure you put inches, you're going to get a 5.5 foot wall. So that's good at this point. Click OK, click OK, and you saw that our wall shrunk a little bit. One of the things that may have happened is our insulation may have moved from the center, so I'll drag it out temporarily and drop it down the center line. That's the center line, so I saw that blue hash line. Now that we have 5.5 inch stud width, let's make our insulation 5.5 inches. And now it fills up the whole stud cavity, exactly what we wanted. So a couple of things we want to add to jazz this up. First of all, our roof is too steep. So I'm going to select the roof. I'm going to come over to the properties browser. I'm going to go down and look until I find dimensions and slope. Instead of a 9/12 roof slope or pitch, we want a 5/12 roof slope or pitch. Slope is just like in math, rise over run. 5/12 means for every 12 inches of horizontal run, we get 5 inches of rise. This messed up our annotation a little bit, so I will move in closely and drag the leader arrow back to the roof. The way that we indicate roof slope is on the Annotate tab. We use this thing called Spot Slope. Spot Slope gives you a couple options. You could use an arrow to represent slope. You see there a preview of what the arrow looks like. We can use a triangle, which is the way we're going to do it because, well, triangle is a little more intuitive. We're defining the rise and run. The slope length is defined just by a right triangle. So I am going to click on the roof to attach it to that. I'm going to move my mouse pointer to the outside of roof because that's the side on which I want to indicate the slope, and click it down to locate it. 1/16 of an inch offset just shows how much of a space is there between them. I don't want any more slope, so I'll hit escape a couple times to get out of placing slope arrows. And I'm going to actually drag this up, and I'm going to shrink the size of the triangle by grabbing that grip. And now the nice thing about that is that it fits nicely. It doesn't overwhelm things, but it indicates that we have a 5-inch rise, 12-inch run, 5/12 pitch. Much more reasonable. 9/12 is more of a majestic mansion type slope. 5/12 is more of a common man slope, which is what we want for a shed. So we need to add some detail items, including a fascia board, closes off the joists, the end of the roof rafters. We need a double top plate. We need a single bottom plate. We need a continuous rim joist. So all of these items are under Annotate, and they're detail components. So I click on component, and I'm going to click on edit type. And I'm going to load in some detail items. So when this brings up our library of things, open up detail items, open up wood and plastic, open up wood framing, and you may not have all these options, but you will have the correct options. And we're looking for nominal cut lumber. Nominal meaning it's been fine-tuned to 2x6, 2x10, 2x8. We also call it dimensional lumber. And a section is the slice through the end. You'll see this is the profile for which we're looking. I'm going to open that up. If you don't get the selection window, it's because the right sizes have been brought in. If you do get it, we want to bring in a 2x4, so I'll click on that and then control click 2x6, 2x8, 2x10. And I also want to bring in a 1x10. You'll see that in a little bit. And click OK, click OK. And now when I have nominal cut lumber section, 1x10 is not what I want. I'm going to put in the bottom plate. So I'm going to pull this down. I'm going to choose a 2x6 nominal cut lumber. I'm going to press spacebar to rotate. There we go. The right corner is selected. I plop that down. And the nice thing about this is it brings along what's called a masking region. So anything behind this section will be hidden. So I don't have to delete any items. I can just hide them. I want a double top plate. So I'm going to rotate again because the top of my plate needs to be at the roof level because the roof will sit on top of this plate. Drop in a first plate. Drop in a second plate. Escape up. Oh, sometimes that doesn't work. So I'll come back up to component. It's a 2x6 still. What I'm going to do is I'll show you another way to approach this. I'm going to just insert it out here, which is clearly where I don't want it. Hit cancel a couple times. And I'll use the align tool to now put it in place. So modify tab, align tool. I want this face to move up to here. So pick the destination, pick what moves, lock it in place. I want this face to go to the outside face of stud. So I'm going to face a core picked. I'm still in the align tool, and the way I know that is down here they're telling me pick a new reference for alignment. I also, on the mouse pointer, you can see the little align tool indicating what are we currently doing. So I want to move to, and I'm going to zoom in. I have to choose it up here. Face of stud, destination, this face of plate moving it, lock it in place. Cancel, cancel, and now I have a double top plate. I also need a rim joist. 2x10 studs, so I come over to annotate, component, pull down and look for a 2x10 under the nominal cut lumber section. That's going to be the same depth as the joists. The outside face of joist is aligned with the rim joist, and now we have that detail item. Hit escape a couple times to get out of it. Now the problem is right now we have an exposed floor system. So I'm going to show you a trick to allow our wall to look like it continues down as far as the finishes go, but the wall construction won't, so we won't have this line of stud going down. So I'm going to take my wall and I'm going to drag, again I have the insulation chosen, I'm going to take the bottom of my wall, I'm going to drag it down a little bit. Not all the way, because I want to use the alignment tool to make sure that I lock it in place. So I'm going to go back up to modify, choose align, destination, thing to move, lock it in place. Escape, escape. So the problem now is that I have this finished gypboard, which isn't going to go into the floor, indicated, but I like the fact that my finish on the outside goes down because this siding will now protect the floor. I can use a tool called Join Geometry. So on the Modify tab, under Join, if there's an arrow next to a group, that means there are some other options available, but we're happy with the default of Join. And I'm going to choose the floor to be joined with the wall. At this point, cancel out of this command a little bit. If I hover over the wall, you see that it still goes down to the bottom of the joist, but the portion of the wall that interfered with the floor joist is now gone. A couple of things we notice. One, I have a little issue. I chose the floor line to be my alignment for my bottom plate, but it turns out this finish hardwood isn't going to be there until we're already in place with the structure. So where I really want my floor line to be is on the top of the plywood, because the plywood sheathing will be there before the wall. So this is kind of a reference level. So I'm actually going to align, moving to the floor level, my top of plywood. I'm going to lock that in place. The problem being now, well, look, I didn't lock my alignment with the rim joist. So I'll use the align tool again, move to the bottom of the floor joist, my rim joist, and lock it in place. Now, my bottom plate's at the right place. My floor reference goes to the top of plywood. Finish is just extra. It doesn't count for a construction reference. My rim joist is in place. My gypsum board stops down here. In actuality, my gypsum board is going to sometimes be there before the floor, probably be there before the floor, but we're not worried about that kind of detail. However, my sill plate, bottom plate, does sit on top of the plywood, which is what I want. But now we have our floor protected. Up at the top, a couple of things. I'm going to draw a ceiling in, and my ceiling joist will sit on top of the double top plate. But we need our roof rafters to also sit on top of the top plate. So I'm going to fake this a little bit. Hit escape a couple times, get out of the align tool. My roof right now is attached to the roof level, but I want it to come down so that it actually rests on top of double top plate. So I'm going to just incrementally move it down. I'm going to offset it from the base, offset the base from our level, and I'm going to try an inch and see what happens. So negative 0 space 1 is negative an inch. Not enough. So let's change it to 2 inches. Negative offset. Getting closer. Ultimately, what I want is I want this intersection with the top of the plate to occur pretty close out to here. That just maximizes our bearing area, or the amount of contact we have between the roof rafter and the top plate. So I'm going to move it down maybe, let's say, 2.5 inches. Pretty close. 2 5/8. This is really just a trial and error. And that looks pretty darn close, so I'm going to call that good. And what they will do in the field is they will cut out a portion of roof rafter that is called a bird's mouth, and they will notch it so that it actually sits on top of the top plate. We can't put a sloped rafter on top of a flat plate and expect for any true contact. They do make special seats, which are pieces of bent thin gauge material, metal, that will allow you to do that, but it's much easier and cheaper to just notch out the rafter, sit it on top. So now we have our roof rafter bearing correctly. The way that we would dimension this in the field is like this. We would go up to a line, or I'm sorry, a line dimension. We would choose the top of the plate, and we would actually dimension the point where this face of wall would intersect the rafter up here at the top. And that would allow them to figure out their geometry. We're not going to get that detailed on this. We will with our houses. I messed up my leader. I'll bring that back down to our asphalt shingles. Zoom a little closer. One of the things I don't like about Revit is that it doesn't allow you to snap to truly connect those two together, but that's pretty close. And now we have a nice looking top of wall. I need a fascia board out here to close it off. I'm going to go to Annotate, Component. This is going to be a 1x10. And I want to connect it to the top of the roof rafter. Well, in this case, it doesn't give me a good location, so I'm going to use the Align tool again. So I'm going to align, modify align, destination, item to move. Oops, I picked the wrong line, so we'll undo that. Align, destination, item to move, lock it in place. This next movement is not going to be as fine-tuned because I don't have an exact point. What I want to do is I want to move the top of my fascia board to that intersection, so I will just fine-tune by dragging. That's pretty good. And voila, we have a continuous 1x10 fascia board. And I'm going to annotate that real quick. Text, 330 seconds, 2-segment leader coming out of the top. And we'll just click on the fascia board, angle out, horizontal. Oh, all caps all the time. click it down. I don't like that width, so I'm going to hit escape to get out of the text tool and bring it in and go with 2 lines. That looks pretty good. All right. We also need to create a soffit, a horizontal piece in here. And what we can do for that is we can go back up to annotate and pick component, and we're going to load some more stuff. So we'll click on edit type and load, or we could just load family from up here. Same thing. 2 different ways to do it. Detail items, wood and plastic, wood framing. So now, in place of the section for nominal cut lumber, we're going to actually use top. Side is thin, top is wide. We're going to use the wide profile. Click on open, and if it gives you this dialog, bring in a, let's see, a 2x4, and then control click a 2x6, 2x8, and 2x10 just in case. And bring those in. We're going to use some 2x4 framing. So we're already nominal cut lumber top, which is what we want, 2x4. And the way that this works is I will choose some reference point to start and some reference point to finish, and hit escape. So this is my 2x4 now. Again, it masks or closes out, because what they'll do is they'll come in and take 2x4s. They'll do what's called scab it to the side of the roof rafter, which just means put it up next to it and nail into it. They'll nail the fascia board into it, and they'll nail this then through the plywood into the studs. Not a structural piece, but it provides some support for our soffit material. I'm actually going to take it and move it up a little bit. I may even see if I can get a little cute with the align tool. Click on align, and I'm going to align to this and move that to it. And I wonder if there's an offset available. Nope. So that was a little silly. What I'm actually going to do is undo my alignment. So I will click on that, move it up. I'm actually going to dimension it. I'll put in a dimension from here to here. I'm going to lock it because I actually want to change this to a 1/2 inch. But I'm not going to leave the dimension in. I just use the dimension to actually set as a 1/2 inch. I'm not going to dimension it because what the guy or gal in the field will do is when I come up here and I annotate using a detail line, so this is the first time I'm going to draw in some details of my own using a rectangle. I'm just going to make a little rectangle here that indicates soffit material. And actually I drew my rectangle a little wide. I want to stop that at the siding. We have this siding actually won't continue up. We'll have to do something to fix that, or we can just leave it. But this down here is called soffit material. So what we're going to do is add some more annotations. We're going to say, you know what, let's modify copy this. We already have some text. Why not just copy what we already have? We're going to change this to 2x4 soffit framing. Just there to support the soffit, doesn't do anything else. Escape. Now I don't know what changes I made. I'm going to move this up. And there we go. Now, one of the problems here is that my fascia board leader is coming close to the 2x4. So let's move it down a little bit. Always think about interference. How can I make my notations as clear as possible so that I don't get calls from the field and waste my time trying to hold the hand of a contractor? I've done that too many times. Go here and copy again. We're going to move it down. And this is going to be vented aluminum soffit. They just pre-purchase material, cut it to fit, and they nail it to the bottom of those 2x4s, and it allows airflow. That's the venting portion. Wood siding, I'm going to continue to move that down. And you'll see that as you put in more, stop editing. No, I don't want to save my changes. As you put in more and more annotations, you're going to get interferences. So it's a continuous struggle to move and fit. And maybe this only wants to be 2 lines. That'll help out a little bit. Okay. So now we've got a fascia board. We've got some 2x4 framing for the soffit. We have a vented soffit. Let's put in a ceiling. So we're going to go to the floor plan for this. Got all these beautiful trees. And I note on my floor plan that I see my ceiling, or my roof, which is a little odd, but there's something called an underlay, which allows us to, even though I'm on the roof plan, that's why I see it. I'm on the floor plan. If I wanted to see my roof, I can actually come up here to floor plan view details and scroll down, and under underlay, I can choose what is the base level of view I want. Well, I might want to add the roof. And now suddenly, kind of grayed out in ghost fashion, I see the roof outline. And that's nice that if I want to use that as an alignment tool, I can use it as a reference. If I'm drawing 2 floors, I might turn on a second floor underlay to see what walls are above me now, which walls do I have to support. So this underlay is nice. If I want to look up, well, because it's the roof, I can still see it. If I want to look down on the roof, and maybe I want to say that well, because the roof is my only upper layer, I can't have a bounding box. But in the future, we'll work with more underlays. But it's a nice way to have other floors as references. In this case, I don't really want to see the roof, so I'm going to turn it to none. When you go to print your drawings, you never want an underlay turned on. You want to turn off all your underlays. It's really just a working tool. But anyhow, here on the floor plan, I'm going to draw a ceiling. So, Architecture tab, Ceiling. I'm going to choose, how about gypsum wallboard on metal stud? We're going to do gypsum wallboard on wood stud, but this is a nice starting point. So let's edit the type. Let's duplicate it. And we're going to say gypsum wallboard on 2x6 joist. Now in this case, I don't have to do all caps all the time. It's just the title for me. I'm going to edit the construction. So my structure, which is the core, is actually going to be 2x6 wood stud. So I'm going to change the material from metal stud layer to softwood lumber. Click OK. And instead of 3 5/8 for the metal stud size, we're going to use 2x6s. So this is 5.5 inches thick. Click OK. Click OK. We're good. You'll note that I use 5/8 inch gyp board. That just helps to keep the sag down for a ceiling. I can check automatic ceiling, but unfortunately it doesn't find any areas. Strange, because, well, I've drawn them. We haven't created any rooms though. So I'm going to sketch the ceiling, and I'm going to use a rectangle. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a rectangle. It doesn't match anything, just to show you how I can use the align tool. This right now is the extent of my ceiling. So if I go to my section, I have a ceiling, but it stops out here in space. There's nothing holding it up. So I want to expand it, so I want my ceiling to come out, and in general, most of our construction is going to go out to the outside face of stud. That's kind of a reference point. We need studs to support things. We need studs to be supported by things, like the floor down here. So generally, the outside face of stud is going to be the limit for most of our construction. I can do one of 2 things. One, I can double click on here to edit it, but they won't let me edit in section view. So I can choose a floor plan or a plan view in which I can see it. Well, I drew it on the floor. Let's go to the floor. Let's open that view. And I'm going to use the align tool to align my ceiling to outside face of stud. Pick faces of core, destination, item to move, lock it. I'm going to do this around all 4 sides. Destination, item to move, lock it. The align tool keeps going. You can see on my mouse pointer has the little line tool to let me know I'm still in that. Destination, item to move, lock it. Destination, item to move, lock it. Hit escape a couple times, or the green check mark. Escape allows us to go back into edit mode for drawing things. The green check mark completely finishes our changes and applies them. So now let's go back and look at our section. And look at that. My ceiling goes out to the edge of stud. Beautiful. The only problem is I have my gyp board sitting on top of the double wall plate. However, the gypboard won't be there until the ceiling joists are in place. So because the ceiling joists need to go in first and they will sit directly on top of the wall plate, I'm going to use the Align tool again. You're going to find the Align tool to be a great tool and one of your best friends as you're editing, especially sections. Align, destination is the roof level, because that's where I put my top of wall plate. And I'm going to move my ceiling joist to that and lock it in place. Escape a couple times and then align. My problem now is, well, I have some overlap between ceiling and roof rafter. So I'm going to join geometry. Modify, join. I'm going to join the roof and the ceiling. Well, that was interesting. It took away my finish on my roof. Not a big fan of that. Let's undo. How about if I choose a different order? Choose the, let's save my project, okay. Choose the roof and then the ceiling. Ah, much better. So essentially what we're going to say is happening, we're going to join the roof and the wall too, just to make one nice gypsum board line. So what we're going to say is that the roof joists are hiding the ceiling joist. So the roof rafters are hiding the ceiling. So this is happening behind it. So one of the things we can do is we can draw a hidden line. Let's go up to annotate. Let's go to detail line. For our line style, we're going to choose hidden. I'm going to come from here, and this is basically showing the portion of the ceiling joist that occurs back beyond the roof rafter. And for some reason I can't align to wall stud. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click down there and finish it. I'm going to do a vertical edge, finish that, cancel, stop drilling. I don't like the lines and there's not enough dashes. So let's change our scale and see if that helps. I'm going to try to do 1/2 inch equals a foot. There we go, so that works now. So this is the continuation of the ceiling joist beyond the roof rafter. I'm going to align because I want this to come out all the way to the edge of stud if possible. And lock it. Beautiful. Now one of the things you'll notice is that my ceiling stops before the plywood. If for some reason you get your ceiling joist sticking through the roof, you can shorten that up a little bit so that the end happens here where the roof surface is higher, or you may have to play around with that roof offset that we used earlier. However, this looks pretty good now. Roof rafter is continuous, hidden line indicating that my roof joist goes beyond, gypsum wallboard. I think my section looks pretty good. So I don't have all my annotations. I will leave that to you to finish all the annotations. But this looks like a really nice wall section, if I do say so myself. At this point, if you have the concrete pad added below your floor, I would edit your floor type and get rid of the concrete layer. We don't need that. We will actually get rid of it and be done with it because we're going to put stone on our site plan. So one of the things we have to do now, though, is go back to our floor plan. And even though this is the section we're going to use, I like to throw in some extra sections. I call them full building sections because they go the full length and width of the building, and it helps with construction details. I try to avoid openings, so I'm going to drag this. Nope, I'm moving the door, not what I wanted to do. I'm going to drag this section down below the door a little bit. And now when I double click to open that section, you will see, first of all, I'm on low level of detail, of course. I'm going to go to fine level detail. But I haven't adjusted my walls yet. So I'm going to do what I did before. And I'm going to move down my wall to align to the bottom of the joist and lock it. Same thing over here with my exterior wall, align to bottom of joist and lock it. One of the problems, though, and this is the door frame beyond, that's what I'm saying. One of the problems, though, is in general, brick needs support. So in reality, if we were actually going to do a brick facade on a shed, which we wouldn't do, we'd put a steel angle attached to the outside of the floor system, and we would use that to support the brick. we're not going to go that fancy right now. In a house, we're generally going to have a concrete masonry unit, CMU basement wall, or a concrete wall, and it would support the brick. In this case, though, we're good with this. I'm not going to clean up the geometry because this isn't a section we're going to show. I'm just going to leave it like this. This is really for the outside appearance. Hit escape, put the lines are good. Then I'm going to go to my other, go back to the floor plan. I'm going to go to my other full building section. And this wall we already fixed in another one. We click on Find Level of Detail. You'll even see it's cleaned up with joined geometry. But over here, I don't care about joining geometry. So I'm just going to align to the bottom of the floor joist, the bottom of my wall. I'm good. Lock it. Okay. I'm not even going to add a rim joist because, in all honesty, no one's ever going to see that. I already have that covered in my other section. Now if I go to my 3D view, the nice thing about what I've just done is that my floor system is hidden. You can't see the floor anymore. The wall covers it up, and that is exactly the thing for which we were looking. However, I need a stone base. So I'm going to go back to my site plan. And around the house, I'm going to establish a guaranteed elevation of -18 inches below the floor. I'm going to do that by going to Massing and Site. I'm going to select my topo surface and edit the surface. I'm going to place some points. I'm going to place points that have a -1'6" elevation, and I'm going to just put that all the way around my shed. And now if I go to my sections, if everything worked according to plan, you'll see that I have a nice flat surface on which I can build my shed. There's no more earth approaching the bottom of that shed, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to come back now to our topo surface. I'll select that in this view and edit surface. Problem is I don't want to edit it in section view. I'm going to go back to the site plan. And I'm now going to add, you know what, I'm going to get out of that. I'm going to try something else. So I'm going to go back to modify and red X change, get all rid of my changes. I'm going to go to annotate. And I'm going to draw a detail line, and it's going to be a rectangle. My rectangle here is going to indicate two things. The first one, I'm going to use, oh, you'll see I'm still in hidden line style, so let's change that to, let's just say lines. I'm going to make a rectangle that's going to define the surface of stone on which I sit my shed. And then I'm going to draw another rectangle, and this is going to be the slope down to the surface. I'm not dimensioning it. It's not that critical. I dimension it, hit escape a couple times. But the nice thing is now I'm pretty sure that I go back to Massing and Site, and I select my topo surface, and I edit the surface. When I place points now, I should be able to use that sketch. So I am going to come down 11 inches from the floor now, because that will give us, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to come down 10. 2 by 10s are 9 1/4. 3/4 inch plywood is 10. So the top of our stone is going to be -0 feet 10 inches down. And those points are going to be at the corners of this first rectangle. Now I'm going to come down to our -1'6", because that's where our soil is right now. And I'm going to force these, and it's okay that I'm over placing points. This is already 1'6", but I want to guarantee that this 1'6" here is right on my rectangle. Now green check mark and finish. I'm going to actually delete these rectangles now. Should have probably gone and checked what it looked like first, but I delete those rectangles. And when I zoom in here, you can really see how now my walkway goes up. And let's go to our section, because that'll really show us what we're facing. And that didn't work anywhere as I expected. So when that happens, when you get unexpected results, you go back to the drawing board. Literally, edit topo surface. Go back to the site plan. And I'm going to delete these points. I'm going to draw another rectangle. So I'm going to stop editing. Oh, I want to check mark, green check mark, and edit that and save the editing edits. And doing their detail line styles, lines. How about I make a rectangle way out here? I want this whole area to be negative 18 inches. So the way I'm going to fool Revit into that is now I'm going to come back out to my topo surface. I'm going to edit my topo surface. I'm going to place points at -1'6", and I'm actually going to put a whole series of them. To guarantee that this whole rectangle is now at -18 inches. I think. Find out soon. Okay, so let's go to our section. That looks pretty good. I'm hoping this is going to work. Let's go back to our site plan. This large area now definitely 18 inches below the floor. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to split the topo surface, because now that I have these crazy contours out here, it's making the rest of the site difficult to manage and get the elevations that I want. So I am going to actually go back to masking and site. I'm going to choose split surface. I'm going to choose my topo surface as a surface to split. I'm going to draw a rectangle that basically will take part of this existing topo surface and make it into its own separate topo surface. And I'm using that rectangle that I drew previously as a reference. That's good. I'm done. So I think what I want to do is probably, let's see. Yeah, I don't want to make any changes. Let's delete our sidewalk for now. And now let's split the surface and rectangle to define it. Oh, I was playing around off camera, and I've already split the surface, but once you do that, you will have split it. I'm going to cancel the changes here. I'm going to show you that if I were to get rid of my rectangle now. Oops, I deleted too much. Undo. I select that in its own topography area. So this now is an area with a rectangle cut out. This is its own topographical surface. But because I set it so that the edges were at the same height, once I split it, it'll continue to be at that same height unless I change the edge. So I'm not going to do that. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and edit this surface. I'm going to place some more points 10 inches below the floor, because 9 1/4 inch joist, 3/4 inch plywood takes us right to the bottom. And I'm just going to make a nice flat area in here on which our shed will rest. Now, in reality, this would be stone, but for simplicity, I'm going to leave it as grass. And let's go to our sections. And nothing happened. Beautiful. Oh, look, it even depresses so that as the water drains, it can go sit underneath of our shed. This is not going as I had hoped. So at this point, I'm going to bail, and we will work on site work in the future. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back, I'm going to edit my topo surface, and I'm just going to get rid of these points. Green check. Go back to my section. At least it's now a flat surface. And we'll call it good. One thing I will do is I'll go back to section 1 and I'm going to right click and hide this in view so that it doesn't look so silly. But there we go. That is our shed project in a nutshell. I'll come back with one more video that helps with drawing organization.